The law touches pretty much every aspect of our lives, from making sure most of us pay our taxes to stopping us texting while we drive, and even singing obscene songs in public. But who makes the laws? How are they made? Where do you come in? And how do I fight for my right to sing obscene songs in public? State and territory governments and the federal government all make laws. National laws are handled by the federal government. They're made here, in Parliament House in Canberra. All laws start as ideas, sometimes sparked by public pressure like protests, or on an issue that's been brought to our attention by the media. Community and lobby groups can also approach members of Parliament with some suggestions, and often the government already has its own priorities for what it wants to get done. So a member of the government, usually a minister, then takes the idea to Parliament and presents it as a bill. That's a proposal for a new law, but it can also be a change to one that already exists.
I present the Climate Change National Framework for Adaptation and Mitigation Bill 2020 and the explanatory memorandum.
But not all bills are destined to grow up to become laws. Bills need to be supported by a majority of politicians, voting in the lower house, called the House of Representatives, and the upper house, called the Senate. Once they've passed both of those stages, they're then signed off by the Governor-General, who represents the Crown in Australia, and they become laws. Sounds easy, right? Well, most of the time there's actually a bit more back and forth, and sometimes months or years of back and forth. Let's walk through it. Let's say you're a minister and you've been alerted to a problem by a community group. In this case, you've just heard from a group campaigning for everybody to get 8 hours of sleep a night, and they want you to make it illegal to hold any uni classes before 10 AM to make sure students are getting enough sleep. So you've drafted a bill addressing that problem, and now you have to introduce it to one of the Houses of Parliament, normally the lower house. This is called a first reading. The next stage is, surprise, a second reading. This is where a bill gets debated and things get kind of heated. This can be the most interesting part because it's where you'll see politicians go hammer and tongs to convince the House that they're right.
We will be here until this legislation is dealt with.
I fart in your general direction.
The government is not going to support the motion.
Then they might make changes called amendments, essentially adding in new rules or conditions that then become part of the proposal. So, for example, just say you haven't got enough votes to get your bill in its current form through the House, but the opposition says they'll vote for it if you add in a little sweetener for them. In this case, the opposition thinks 10 AM is still too early to start class. So they want you to include another rule in your bill. The coffee lobby has recently been arguing that they've got the answer, suggesting free coffee be given out to students starting class at that time, and the opposition agrees with them. So they ask you to make sure that that's in the bill as well. That's an amendment. So it wasn't initially part of your idea, but it's what's going to get your bill over the line. So you tack it on. And that brings us to the third reading, when politicians vote on whether or not the bill should be law. If you get a majority of votes, your bill is passed through the House.
The question is that the bill be agreed to. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it.
If you've managed to get them all on side, especially on a pretty controversial idea like this one, first thing, well done, and just one more thing. You're now going to have to do it all over again, but in the other House of Parliament. That's because for a bill to become law, it needs to pass both Houses of Parliament.